Hey there, Dr. Avinash here. Let's talk about some anti-amoebic drugs. Now, before we go to anti-amoebic drugs, let us at least have a look at the life cycle of Entamoeba histolytica, because this is important even from your microbiome perspective. The organism comes through contaminated water or food. That's how this entamoeba enters into the patient's body. Now, when that happens, the cyst is present in that contaminated water or food. The cyst enters into the stomach. In stomach, it is protected by a nice, beautiful cell wall. So it has a nice refractile cell wall. It is not going to damage, the HCl is not going to damage the cyst. The cyst then reaches the small intestine where it undergoes excistation. Excistation means coming out of the cyst. Now, a mature cyst is quadrinucleate. Okay, so 4 nucleus are there. This undergoes multiplication one more time to become 8 nuclei. Okay, so basically as we go ahead, you will see one trophozoite give quadrinucleate cyst. Okay, and that means from one trophozoite you got 8 nucleated cyst, and this cyst then breaks into 8 pieces. So now you have 8 trophozoites from each cyst. Simple enough. So mature cyst came in, could not get destroyed in the stomach, went into the small intestine. 8 trophozoites were formed. These trophozoites migrate to the large intestine where they set up an infection. Now the infection can be a surface infection. So imagine this is the lumen of the large intestine, and this is these are the cells of the large intestine. Okay, randomly drawn so that you understand this properly. The part that I am drawing right now is what we call as the submucosa, and the submucosa has lots of blood vessels, capillaries, lymphatics, and so on and so forth. And this is a direct connection to the liver, because here we actually have blood vessels of the portal system. Simple. So let me make you understand what is happening. In many people, the amoeba cyst actually is in the lumen only. Here they get asymptomatic infection, nothing happens. In some, these amoeba decide to burrow through these epithelial cells and come to the submucosa. As they come to the submucosa, they actually have created a small tract here, and now below the submucosa is the muscle layer, right? So here is the muscle layer. They can't cross the muscle layer, so they start spreading out laterally, and they start eating tissue in this submucosal region, and that creates a typical ulcer called as the flask shaped ulcer. From outside you see a very small hole, but inside it's a big flask inside. Simple. So this is what the flask shaped ulcer probably looks like. Because of irritation of the GIT, loose motions can happen, and because some of the blood vessels will break in this particular ulcers, bleeding may take place, leading to amoebic dysentery. So there's diarrhea and dysentery as a complication. Now the trophozoites are multiplying here, and as they are multiplying in this cyst, they keep on coming out intermittently in the lumens. There are many trophozoites in the lumen. They are freely enjoying their lives. Some of the trophozoites have higher aspirations. They are not satisfied with being just a normal trophozoite, so they decide that I want to go to another patient, and these become the quadrinucleate cyst. Simple. And the cyst then goes out through the intestine into the fecal matter and infects the next host who ingests it through contaminated food and water. Clear with this? Now, if the blood can come out of the blood vessels and into the lumen, it is quite possible that the trophozoites can enter into the blood. I hope you are getting the concept. And if the trophozoite enter the blood, you know where these blood vessels lead to? They all go to liver. So this trophozoite will enter the liver through the portal vein. Now there are 2 branches of the portal vein, the right and the left branch. Most inline branch. So if this is the main portal vein, the left portal vein is at a branch, The right one is in line, and actually if you trace this, most of the amoebic infection are the right lobe of the liver, because that's where the trophozoites tend to reach. Not just there, they are in the right posterior superior part of the liver. This condition now would be called as the amoebic liver abscess, also known as extraintestinal amoebiasis. Now understand, liver is the first site. From here it can go to the lungs, it can go to bones, it can go to the pleura, it can go to the peritoneum, it can then spread anywhere it wants. So then there is no obstructing trophozoites. We need to make a medicine that can kill amoeba here in the lumen, and medicines that can kill amoeba here at the level of amoebic liver abscess or extraintestinal amoebiasis. And that's why we have this beautiful drug called as metronidazole. This is a broad spectrum cidal drug. It has activity against all anaerobic protozoa like Entamoeba histolytica, Trichomonas vaginalis, Giardia, Lamblia, and some anaerobic and microaerophilic bacteria such as Bacillus fragilis, Fusobacterium, Clostridium perfringens, difficile H. pylori, Campylobacter. Even Peptococci, spirochetes, and anaerobic streptococci can be killed. Now, this is how things work. Now, you have to imagine this is the bacterial cell. Metronidazole enters into the bacterial cell. Simple. Metronidazole enters into the bacterial cell. The process is basically diffusion, nothing more than that. Once inside the bacterial cell or amoebic cell, metronidazole becomes a reactive molecule. Its nitro groups is reduced by certain redox proteins, and these redox proteins are only present in anaerobic microorganisms, and this nitro group becomes a highly reactive nitro radical, and this nitro radical is what is cytotoxic. Now remember what I just said, the reactive nitro radical can only be made in anaerobic microorganisms, because the redox proteins that convert the nitro group to nitro radical are only present in the anaerobes. Simple, easy. So aerobes cannot be killed by metronidazole. Once that happens, this nitro radical will start acting like an electron sink. Now what is this electron sink? It competes with the electron acceptors for anaerobic organisms. So if you remember the electron transport chain in human being, at the end oxygen is the electron acceptor, right? In anaerobic organism, for electrons generated by a mechanism called as pyruvate ferredoxin oxidoreductase enzyme pathway. This is their metabolic pathway of pyruvate oxidation. Pyruvate ferredoxin oxidoreductase PFOR pathway. At the end of this pathway, electrons will be generated. Now normally mitochondria is not there, okay, but in amoeba there might be mitochondria. So in these anaerobes, the energy metabolism will get disrupted in the anaerobic condition. See, aerobic condition, metronidazole will not work. One, it will not get activated. Second, the oxygen competes with the nitro radical, right? But here in anaerobic condition, this nitro radical sucks out all the electron from the PFOR, and as a result, the bacteria cannot make ATPs, and that's how it dies. This is what you have to understand. The easiest way to remember metronidazole's adverse drug effect is by remembering the name itself, metronidazole. M stands for mutagenesis and metallic taste. So it is known to mutate the DNA, which means there is a very little chance that it will cause damage to the developing baby. So don't give it in pregnant women. Plus it has a metallic taste. E is for enzyme inducer. It can induce enzymes and speed up the breakdown of other drugs. T is for first trimester. Don't give it. It also causes thrombophlebitis. R is for rash. O is for occasional loose stools, which has two O's, so that should point you to loose motions. Neuropathy. So uh, please be careful. Is if a patient has neurological diseases, don't give metronidazole. It causes itching. It is ineffective against aerobes, so don't give it unnecessarily. D for drug eruption or disulfiram reaction or blood dyscrasias. So blood disorders. What is disulfiram reaction? It's literally like alcohol intolerance that happens in patients who take metronidazole. So that's one major side effect. So when you're giving metronidazole, you have to inform the patient, please don't have alcohol. A is for anorexia, skip Z and O because they don't fit in my mnemonic. And L is for leukopenia, the WBC count falls. Now, as I have been telling you right throughout this series, the adverse drug effect that I am sharing with you right now are just a mnemonics. You have to look at the textbook to see how to write it in your exam. The writing part has to be done from your textbooks. Please, without doing that, without writing the content that is given in the textbook, it will be very difficult to get marks. Okay, and let's talk about the uses then. It's the mnemonic I use is GETPA. So Giardia lamblia, Entamoeba histolytica, and Trichomonas vaginalis. It can even be used for pseudomembranous enterocolitis, many anaerobic infections including H. pylori, and acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. Must know. Now, if you go through the textbook, you will understand what to write. Like, the content is given there. You have already understood the thing. Now, there is some by-hearting part left. If you can remember the dosage, it would be amazing. An odd question that can come is this. What is the difference between metronidazole and tinidazole? It's almost similar, except tinidazole is slower in its metabolism, duration of action is longer, and as a result, the dosage schedule is much more simple, more suited for single dose or once a daily therapy. And in amoebiasis, tinidazole is slightly better as compared to metronidazole, and it is generally better tolerated with lower incidences of side effects like metallic taste, nausea, and rash. The uses are going to be exactly the same. No need of doing secnidazole, ornidazole, or any other drug here. If you do have time, have a look at diloxanide furoate. Again, we are not going to use this much in your clinical practice, so not really that important. And notes on treatment of amoebiasis, have a look at it. It will be helpful for your clinical practice, but it is never going to come in your theory exam, so you can easily skip that part. Now, in this book, they have given you drugs for giardiasis, which is basically the same set of drugs that we studied right now. And drugs for leishmaniasis and Trichomonas vaginalis is also being given. You don't have to do any of that. Okay. Actually, for leishmania, we use amphotericin B, which we studied in antifungal chapter. So, once you have done antifungals, please have a look at amphotericin B from here, and it should give you a good enough idea of what to write extra. Apart from this, please don't waste your time on this particular chapter. It's really not that important. Apart from metronidazole, an overview is more than sufficient. Okay, I hope you have understood this chapter properly. I'll see you in yet another video. Till the next time we meet, this is Dr. Avinash signing off for now. Take care, keep studying and keep rocking. Bye bye.